It's great to be in the SEC. Welcome back to another episode of the SEC Recap Podcast. I am your host, Ben Warren. We are back after a week off. Not my fault. I was attacked by a pit bull last Sunday. Was down all week recovering. Nonetheless, back to it this week, and we've got a lot to get into. It is an all SEC slate here in week 5, and I am excited. First, let's recap my picks from last week. Didn't have a pod, but I did tweet these out, or I guess you might say I X'd these out. I refuse to call it X. But you can follow me there on Twitter. I'm still going to call it Twitter, at SEC Recap. Let me minimize that here on screen. If you're listening to us in audio form on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you prefer to chug your podcast, thank you so much for listening. But if you want to join us over on YouTube, I do have my graphics here on YouTube. Just makes it a little easier to follow along with what I'm doing. So I would encourage you to come on over to the YouTubes. Smash that thumbs up, hit like, subscribe, follow, support me over here. We have a ton of fun. All right. So recapping my week 4 picks. I went 4 of 9. Not great. I think that puts me just a little over 50% on the year. Again, I'm tracking that week by week on Twitter, but we'll start with the noon games, work our way up through the evening games really, really quick here. So first up, we had Auburn at Texas A&M. I picked Texas A&M to win and cover the 7.5. Ching. That was a dub. And then we had Kentucky at Vanderbilt. Kentucky was a 13.5 point favorite. Picked them to win and cover that. Vanderbilt scores some points. They just can't really stop anybody. So that was a dub. Then this was my upset pick. I know is a trendy one. Probably should have been a red flag. But I thought if there was a year for it to happen, it would have been this year. It was Lane Kiffin's number 15 Ole Miss Rebels going down to Tuscaloosa, playing number 13 Alabama. If there was a year for it to happen, it was going to be this year, but it didn't happen. In true Lane Kiffin fashion, he blew it in his biggest opportunity. He did it at Tennessee, did it at USC. He's doing it here at Ole Miss again. Just kind of what Lane Kiffin does, I think. I'd picked him to win outright as 7.5 point underdogs. Did okay for the first half, played him close, but then just got the doors blown wide open in the second half. Not worth diving into much deeper than that. Kiffin blew it. That is the primary takeaway from there. He'll never have an easier opportunity to beat Nick Saban's Alabama Crimson Tide. So RIP. Then we had UTSA, that's UT San Antonio, going on the road to Neyland Stadium, Knoxville, Tennessee, to take on the number 23 ranked Tennessee Volunteers. Never had any doubts that Tennessee would really win this game, although with the way Tennessee had kind of been sliding, especially coming off that really disappointing performance in the Swamp, thought UTSA might be able to cover that 20.5. I know they're without starting quarterback Frank Harris, but I thought, depending on what kind of slide the Vols are on, it could be another disappointing outing. It wasn't. Had a lull in the third quarter. It's been talked about a ton. I'm not going to rehash it all here. But Joe Milton played great. Had an 81-yard run to open the literally on the first play of the game. Kind of set the tone. So despite that third quarter lull, Vols put it on them. Had no issues getting by UT San Antonio. So they did not cover. So picked the dub, did not pick the point spread. I'm taking the L on that one. Then the surprise of the weekend to me, Arkansas at number 12, LSU. Thought LSU would just kind of get it going and never slow down, but Arkansas was in there in the fourth quarter. That was a really, really fun one to watch as a neutral observer. I'm sure if you're an Arkansas or LSU fan, you're more on the edge of your seat, but I picked LSU to win and cover the 17.5. It was much, much closer than that. LSU just squeaked by Arkansas by a field goal. Kudos to Arkansas. I know that's a tough loss, but my God, you were an underdog in that. You were 17.5 point underdog in that. And for it to be a 3-point game at the end of the fourth, I mean, of course you'd rather have the win, but you got to feel pretty good. It's hard to feel good about a loss, but if there's one you can feel good about, I think it's that one. I mean, played a really, really good game there. Kudos to the Razorbacks. All right. Next one, I picked Florida, Charlotte going to number 25, Florida in the swamp. Florida's a 28-point favorite. And my God, if you're a Tennessee fan, it's a game like that just makes that loss in the previous week all the more disappointing because you kind of got the sense that Florida isn't that good. So what the hell is happening? And that's still my takeaway after this game. Like Florida just basically had to kick field goals all game. They couldn't punch it in. Billy Napier still calling, dialing up field goals in the fourth quarter. He's getting booed by his own fans. Like, I think come the end of the season, that Tennessee win is probably going to be the best win on Florida's resume. And that Florida loss is probably going to be the worst, most embarrassing loss on Tennessee's resume. One of, if not the most, certainly. You know, I think Florida won like 22-7. Like they weren't even close to covering that 28-point spread against Charlotte. I contend that Florida is still not really that good of a team. I think last week was Tennessee just Tennesseeing in the swamp like they've done for 20 years. So anyway, I'll take the L on that pick. Florida Gators still suck. That's kind of my takeaway. UAB at Georgia, number 1, Georgia 42-point spread. UAB kept it within, under 30, like 24 or something. I can't remember what the final score was. It was like 49-28, or I don't know. It was somewhere in that range. Georgia didn't cover, but they handled UAB no problem. We'll get into Georgia a little bit more here when we look at our week 5 picks. They go on the road to Jordan-Hare. Then we had a neutral site game, Memphis at Mizzou, but this was in St. Louis. Mizzou was a 6-point fave, basically a home game for them. I mean, it's 3 hours, 2.5, 3 hours east for them from Como, but they handled that no problem. I took that win. And then last game of the evening, we had Mississippi State at South Carolina. Really good game. My God, Will Rogers, they kind of turned him loose. They abandoned that run game that they had kind of been hell-bent on establishing and just let Will Rogers chuck it. And my God, he threw for like almost 500 yards. Wasn't enough for the Bulldogs. Unfortunately, they, again, just have a lot more issues than Will Rogers can fix. But it was good to see them get back to chucking the ball around. I think that works for them, and they need to continue to go that direction, in my opinion. Spencer Rattler still, though, playing just insanely good. Him and Xavier Legette, they have a big-time connection. Yards after catch are a huge problem for teams. But I picked South Carolina to win and cover that 6.5 points. So got that one. Let's move on to talk power rankings here, and then we will get into week 5 matchups because we've got a little bit more to dive into there. Real quick, before I hit my power rankings, while you guys are here, just want to thank you so much. No ad reads, no sponsors for this podcast yet. Have had some offers, but none that I can accept currently. But I do have a donation link up there in the corner. Donate to the pod. That link will also be in the podcast description if you're listening in audio form. And I also have some merch available that I design on my Bonfire store. That's bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. That link will also be in the description if you're listening to the podcast. If you're here on YouTube, I got that link and QR code right up here on the screen. We've got what I call my SEC Pride merch for every SEC team. T-shirts, long sleeve T-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, a variety of colors in all of them. Got the school name, outline of the state, and then the mascot logo in the geographic location of the school. Some really awesome color combinations. I'm featuring the Tennessee Vols here, the nice orange Tennessee outline with the blue tick hound dog in the location of Knoxville on a nice charcoal gray sweatshirt. Perfect for fall, guys. Go check those out. I make a little bit of money off those. It just helps me out. I appreciate it so much. All right, on to power rankings. Starting at the top, no surprises here, week after week. They haven't looked as dominant as they did last year. but they're still undefeated, and I have no reason to move them. So they're sitting at number 1. Behind them, I'm putting Alabama. I think I dropped them last week, but I'm moving Alabama back up. They handled Ole Miss pretty solidly. I think it's looking like Jalen Milroe at quarterback, for better or worse, whether you love that or hate that. That's the way it's going to be. And until they play LSU, this is probably how this top 4 is going to look. We'll see after this weekend what happens with LSU Ole Miss. But right now I got Georgia 1, Alabama 2, LSU 3, Ole Miss 4. And I think the real danger that we're running into here is that Alabama, LSU, Ole Miss kind of three-way tie, three-headed monster in the West. And LSU can avoid that this week if they simply beat Ole Miss. But now that Ole Miss has lost to Bama, if Ole Miss beats LSU, and then Ole Miss somehow beats Alabama, you're in that nasty three-headed monster situation in the West that we were kind of in all last season and until Ole Miss fell off at the very end of the year after that Alabama loss. So LSU can make a big statement. We'll see how this shakes out next week. But LSU 3, Ole Miss 4, right behind them. I'm bumping the Vols back up. Again, this is week to week. It all changes. I dropped them behind Florida last week because they did lose on the road to Florida. But after what I saw from Florida this week, I got to drop the Gators, move Tennessee back up. Tennessee handled UTSA 40-something to 14. I mean, it was a big win. They didn't look perfect, but they looked a lot better. The offense was clicking a lot more. Still got to see a lot more from the Vols. So 5 is about the highest I can have them right now. Then 6, 7, 8, and 9. This could really go a lot of different ways, but at 6 and 7, I gotta put my 2 squads who are undefeated. So I'm giving the benefit of the doubt right now to Kentucky. At 4-0, I think they've earned that number 6 spot. And then number 7, Missouri, also undefeated. They've kind of earned that 7 spot. But if you wanted to make an argument for Missouri 6, Kentucky 7, I would listen to that. And I know a lot of people out there probably think Missouri and Kentucky should be higher than Tennessee, possibly even Ole Miss. I'm not quite buying that right now for reasons I'll get into here in just a minute. Then Texas A&M could be amazing, could also lay a huge egg week to week. I think they're pretty good. I think they could handle Ole Miss. I mean, they do have to go on the road to play Tennessee, but I think A&M could beat Tennessee. But week to week, we're just going to have to kind of see what happens. Dealing with a QB injury right now. And then at number 9, Florida. I could totally see the case to kind of swap those around anywhere between that 6 and 9 range. But that's how I see it this week. Then 10 through 12, Arkansas, South Carolina, Auburn. You can make an argument for me that those could be shuffled. South Carolina, Spencer Rattler's playing out of his mind, but there's not a lot happening on that team outside of that. That doesn't mean they can't come in anywhere and beat you. I absolutely believe they can. But they're sitting at 2-2 right now, 1-1 in conference. Arkansas, as good as they played against LSU, they're sitting at 0-1 in conference, 2-2 overall. Mississippi State, they hung in there with South Carolina, but South Carolina is not a top 5 SEC program right now. Mississippi State's 0-2 in conference, or 2-2 overall. So nothing really impressive there yet. I mean, I know South Carolina went on the road and played Georgia close for a half, but, they couldn't close it out there. Right now, I got to kind of consider that more of the anomaly rather than the standard. All 4 of those, though, are going to come in ahead of Vanderbilt at 14. Sorry, Vandy. It's just the way it is. Vandy can score points. They can't really stop anybody. They're 2-3 overall, 0-1 in conference. So I still think, Auburn can prove something. Still think Mississippi State can prove something. I don't know that Mississippi State's going to prove anything against Alabama this week. I don't know how much Auburn's going to prove against Georgia, though. They do get the Bulldogs at home. South Carolina could absolutely prove something in Knoxville. when they play Tennessee this weekend, and Arkansas could absolutely prove something against Texas A&M. So those back four there, with the exception of Vanderbilt, there's a lot of upside still. We just have to see it. We have to see how that plays out. Now, real quick, before I get into my picks for this week, I want to talk about SEC standings here. Well, no, let's go ahead and get into week 5 picks, and I could talk about this while we break down the matchups. I think that'll be the cleanest, smoothest way to do this. So, as I said in the beginning, it is an all SEC slate, and that gets my juices moving in the fall. I love SEC on SEC matchups. Last season, I always did an SEC game of the week. Since I'm down to one pod a week now, just because I don't have the time to do multiple, I don't dive into a single game, but I want to dig a little bit more into some of these, and I am going to give you my game of the week here as we go through these picks. So I'm picking wins and against the spread. First game we have is number 22, Florida, at Kentucky. So Gators travel up to Lexington, and Vegas basically has this one as a toss. This is an 11 a.m. kick, and I'm in Central Time, so these are going to be Central Time. 11 a.m. kick. Kentucky -1. So flip a coin. That's kind of what Vegas thinks, which I think says a lot when you have a number 22 team going on the road that all they did last week was pretty much kick field goals against Charlotte. I'm actually picking Kentucky in this one. And I know Devin Leary hasn't been perfect, but I mean, honest to God, like I just don't think Florida is that good. So when it comes down to it, noon game in Lexington, home field advantage. I think Kentucky's going to be ready to play this game. They went down to the Swamp, beat Florida last year. I think they want to kind of keep that boot on the Gators' neck and say, hey, we got this. We're competitive now. We own you. ESPN has them favored at 52.1% versus Florida at 47.9%. I know ESPN's FPI doesn't mean a whole lot to a lot of people. But with that game being a coin flip, I think that's pretty on the money. Give me Kentucky. It might be a close one. It might be a 1-point game, but give me Kentucky by a field goal. I think the Wildcats do it. I think they get it done over Florida at home. All right, next game up, we have Texas A&M. Technically at Arkansas, though this is a neutral site game. This is at AT&T Stadium. This is Jerry World. This is going to be on SEC Network. A&M kind of owned the Razorbacks recently in this series, and they are a big favorite according to ESPN. Vegas has A&M at just under a touchdown favorite. Well, -6.5, I guess, whether you count the extra point or not. But Arkansas played LSU really, really well. That's a positive sign. I still think Texas A&M is one of those teams that could come out, and they got so much talent offensively. They got great receivers. We'll see what happens with Wegman, what his status is. But just based on history, I got to go with Texas A&M on this one to win and cover the 6.5. It's a neutral site, but it always feels more of a home game for A&M than it does Arkansas. Some people may disagree with that. That's just the way it appears to me. It's the way I perceive it. So give me the Aggies, but would not be surprised to see Arkansas hang in there or even pull an upset. I'm totally open-minded to that. Could totally see that happen, but I got to make my pick. So I'm going to stick with the Aggies on this one. Then we got number 1 Georgia having to go on the road to play Auburn. Now, this one is not my game of the week. This is the 2:30 CBS game. So this is going to be big time. Big game for Auburn. And Georgia has looked kind of gettable, right? South Carolina showed us that a couple weeks ago. South Carolina went to Athens, played Georgia really close. Georgia offensively just not quite clicking the way we were used to seeing last year. But their defense is still really good. I don't think Auburn is great yet. Vegas likes Georgia minus 14.5, over under 46.5. So they're not saying that Georgia's going to score, 40, 50 points here. And really, if we look at Georgia's last 4 games, like through this season, so 48-7 UT Martin, 45-3 Ball State, whoop-de-doo, 24-14 South Carolina, 49-21 UAB. So against Power 5 teams, they're scoring in the mid to high 40s and allowing, single digit points, except for UAB, who, put up 3 touchdowns. Against Power 5 opponents, South Carolina being the only sample size, they allowed 2 scores, but were held to just 24 points. So there's a chance here for Auburn. Auburn's last 4, UMass, University of Massachusetts, 59 points. They had to go on the road to Cal, night game, West Coast, tough, 14 points. Versus Samford, back at home, 45 points. Loss on the road to Texas A&M, they were held to 10 points. They only gave up 27. So there's some room here for Auburn to kind of hang in there with Georgia. But I think that's about as far as it goes. But weird stuff happens in Jordan-Hare. I know fans are going to be fired up for that game. It doesn't matter how much Hugh Freeze downplays that. So here's my call, listeners. Again, not my game of the week, but I think this is one of the most interesting games. And I think this could be potentially an almost upset, if that makes sense. So maybe like almost upset against the spread. I'm picking Georgia to win. I think it would take a lot for Auburn to truly upset Georgia. It would take a lot of things going wrong for Georgia. It would take a lot of things going right for Auburn. I don't see that happening. But I do see a scenario where even if Georgia wins, Auburn covers that 14.5 points and maybe keeps this within a couple scores. Maybe it takes a late field goal from Georgia to kind of put it outside of 10, or a late touchdown from Georgia and running the clock out to kind of put it at 2 scores. So I would not be surprised to see this within a couple scores in the fourth quarter and Georgia have to kind of put it away late. So super excited for that one. Keep an eye out. I think it could be a really, really, really interesting, fun ball game, especially being on the Plains in Auburn. All right. Then we got number 23, Mizzou, coming down to Nashville to play Vanderbilt. I don't realistically expect Vanderbilt to win in any capacity. Mizzou has shown that they are pretty solid. This is going to be a 3 p.m. SEC network game. But Vandy can score. Okay, Vandy can score points. Let me give you Vandy's point totals. Now they played one more game than Mizzou. But through their last 5, Vandy has scored. Sorry, let me do last 4. 47 points. That was in a win. In a loss, they scored 20. That was to Wake. They lost by 3. They scored 37 against UNLV. And in their loss to Kentucky last week, they still scored 28. Okay. So Vandy easily capable of getting in that 20 to 30 point range. Okay. Now here's Missouri's last 4. Okay. South Dakota, 35 points. MTSU, 23 points. Kansas State, 30 points. Memphis, 34. So Mizzou offensively kind of lives in that 30-point range, that low to mid at the ceiling 30-point range, 30 to 35 points. I can totally see this game being like a 34-27 or a 34-24 type of game. So give me Mizzou to win, but Vanderbilt to cover 13.5. I don't know that Vanderbilt will stop Missouri at all, but I think Vanderbilt can score enough to keep that closer than the 13.5 points are being given. All right, then we got number 13, LSU, going on the road to number 20, Ole Miss. Now, number 1, Georgia at Auburn wasn't my game of the week. And LSU at Ole Miss is also not my game of the week. It's a good one, and it could be for a lot of people. Listen, because this is one of those sort of deciding games for the West, and it has a huge impact. So LSU really needs this game. LSU does not want to be in that three-headed monster situation in the SEC West where, Alabama beat Ole Miss and then Ole Miss beat LSU, but then Ole Miss beat Alabama. And, it's the Ouroboros of SEC standings. We don't want that. They're only a 2.5-point favorite on the road. Ole Miss perfectly capable of winning this game. We saw Arkansas play them close. But LSU needs to win this game. They really, really need to win this game. It's as close to kind of a must-win, that must-win cliche that we talk about all the time, that I think it gets. This is an evening game, not a true night game. It's a 5 p.m. game in Oxford. Good environment, I think. Ole Miss coming off the loss to Bama, they should be fired up to play. Because a win over LSU for Ole Miss would be a huge momentum swing back for your program. You'd probably move up in the rankings. LSU would drop back toward that 20. We'd be asking, is LSU the team we thought they were? Can they actually compete with Alabama? But although I do think Ole Miss can win, they're perfectly capable of winning. I'm going to stick with LSU here. -2.5. Yeah, sure. Maybe this comes down to a field goal. Sure. I'm totally fine with that. I'm just not sure I'm on board with Lane Kiffin in big, meaningful games right now. That's ultimately what it comes down to. I wouldn't be surprised if they win it, but I'm sticking with Ole Miss to win on the road by 3 points. We'll say it's a field goal. Okay. True night game. This is an SEC network. This is my game of the week. 6:30 p.m. local time. Okay. In Neyland, Knoxville, Tennessee, unranked South Carolina takes on the number 21 Tennessee Volunteers. The Vols are an 11.5-point favorite at home. And I have seen people pick this game all over the place. And I think that's what makes it so interesting. So let me give you my reasons why it's my game of the week. Number 1 has nothing to do with the game itself, but it's going to be the environment and the narrative. Tennessee went on the road in the 2022 season with a Heisman candidate, a Heisman front-runner candidate in Hendon Hooker, and they got the brakes beat off of them in a game that they just looked not even prepared to play. Spencer Rattler had a coming out party. He looked like a completely different player than he had all season, threw for like 6 touchdowns. Tennessee couldn't stop him. Tennessee still scored, 30, 40 points, but they just couldn't stop anything South Carolina did. That gave them their second L, knocked them out of any hope of being in the college football playoff. And then Hendon Hooker, non-contact injury, tore his ACL. That was a heartbreaking game on the road for Tennessee in a game where nobody gave South Carolina even a chance at winning that game. Gamecocks come to Knoxville. Tennessee had the dark mode reveal earlier this week. Now, I'm not a big like black jersey. I know it's super popular with like some people. Gen Z really loves like dark mode black jerseys. Um, I don't hate them. I don't think they're ugly by any means. I'm just, they could wear whatever. They could wear the smoky grays. They could wear, the orange jerseys. It wouldn't matter to me. But dark mode for a night game, I don't. There's something about it. They did it to Kentucky last year. It was really nice. You come out looking hard, feel good, play good, that kind of thing. And I think the fans are going to be out and loud for this one. So I think that home field advantage, just that environment, the dark mode, I think the combination of all of that for Tennessee is going to be huge. I think that's going to be huge. So that alone, I think, is going to be worth the spectacle. Here's the second reason. Tennessee ranked at 21, 11.5-point favorite. That's a little larger than most people were expecting. I think some people are questioning, what does Vegas know that, the rest of us don't know? I mean, we all kind of know who's injured, who's going to be available, who's going to be unavailable for this game for the most part. South Carolina has a bad pass defense. So does Tennessee. South Carolina has a bad offensive line. Tennessee has a really good pass rush, near the top, if not the best in the SEC, in terms of getting to the quarterback, pressuring the quarterback, and getting sacks on the quarterback. South Carolina giving up a ton of sacks. So there's some statistical elements to this game, matchup-wise, that make it really interesting. But beyond that, I think this is as must-win as you could possibly get for either team. And here's why. And I'm gonna just kind of zip back over to ESPN's analytics, their FPI, and how they have the teams in the SEC ranked. Now, this is not the same as my power rankings. This is not where I get my power rankings from, right? But this is just sort of like based on everything they do with their FPI. This is how they have the SEC ranked according to that system. Right now, Tennessee is the 6th team in the SEC. And if you look at the SEC standings based on points allowed and points scored, Tennessee is right there in the middle in both of those categories. They're like 6 or 7, both in terms of points allowed and points scored. South Carolina is 9th. So there's not a huge spread between these two teams. But in terms of projected wins, losses for teams that fall within that range, Tennessee's projected wins, losses are 7.9 and 4.2. That basically comes out to 8 and 4. A lot of people are saying Tennessee might have had 10 and 2 upside after the Florida game. I think a lot of people revised those predictions. I've had Tennessee at 9 and 3 since the offseason. I've still got those predictions up on my website. Haven't changed them, so you can still go to secrecap.com and check those out. ESPN valuing Tennessee more as an 8 and 4 team. South Carolina, on the other hand, 6.3 and 5.7. They're effectively valuing South Carolina at that 6 and 6 range, 7 and 5 upside. So like Tennessee might be 9 and 3 upside. South Carolina might be 7 and 5 upside right now. So whoever wins this game gets a huge momentum push for the rest of the season. If Tennessee loses to South Carolina this week, they get a bye week, but then you got Texas A&M rolling into town off of the bye week, okay? Here's how the rest of Tennessee's schedule would shake out. If you drop South Carolina this week, that puts you at 3 and 2. Then you got a good Texas A&M team coming to town. Could absolutely drop that one. Puts you at 3 and 3. Then you got to go on the road to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama. They're not going to be favored to win that game. 3 and 4. Then you got to go on the road at Kentucky. Should they win? Maybe, but that's going to be tough. Potentially 3-5. That's really more of a coin flip. Then you got UConn at home. Let's call it 4-5, 5-4, right? Then you got to go to Missouri. How good is Missouri? Well, we'll see. So now you're potentially 5-6, 6-5. Then you got Georgia coming to town. You're not going to be the favorite against Georgia. Okay. 6-5, 6-6, 7-5, hopefully, or 7-4. And then you play Vanderbilt. Should win that one. So there's kind of your 8-4 upside if you drop South Carolina, drop A&M, drop Alabama, and then you have to win Kentucky, UConn, Missouri. You're probably not going to win Georgia. So A&M, Alabama, Georgia, considering those more potential losses, you're looking at best a 7-5 season if you're the Vols. You've got to win South Carolina. You've got to win this. That's the difference in being that 8-4 that ESPN thinks you are, or potentially, stealing a win you're not supposed to get to 9-3, which I think is what's going to have to happen. Here's what that looks like for South Carolina. South Carolina's sitting at 2-2. Now they're 1-1 in conference. It's great. Tennessee would be fighting for their first conference win. South Carolina wins this. They go 2-1 in conference. Okay, so they're sitting good in conference play. They'd be 3-2 overall. Let's say South Carolina drops this. They're 1-2 in conference. They're 2-3 overall. They get Florida at home. Now, I think they could beat Florida, but we'll see. So that's potentially 3-3. Then they have to go to Missouri. Missouri's had their number the last several years. It's just one of those things. Missouri is in the heads of the Gamecocks. It's 3-4. Then you got to go to Texas A&M. Let's call it 3-5. Then they got Jacksonville State, 4-5. You get Vanderbilt, you should win that game, 5-5. You got Kentucky. They beat Kentucky last year. That was without Will Levis and a bad backup quarterback. Kentucky's going to be better this year. Got a pretty good defense. 5-6. And then you got to play Clemson. Clemson could be garbage. Clemson might be better. But there's the difference in getting to that 6-6 that ESPN thinks the Gamecocks are. So beat Tennessee, you're getting it. You're in that 7-5 range, optimistically. Lose to Tennessee, you're scratching that 6-6, even potentially 5-7. So you don't want to be in that situation. Neither fan base, neither team, none of those coaches, none of those players want to be in that situation. This is a must win if there ever was a must win. And that's why it's my game of the week. Here's how I'm picking it. Environment, dark mode, fans, revenge factor. If you can't get excited about this game as a Tennessee fan, stop watching college football. Tennessee should absolutely win this game. I think South Carolina is going to score points. I think Tennessee is going to score points. I think it's going to be a lot closer than an 11.5 point spread. I know history says otherwise, but it's just the way I feel it in my gut. So give me Tennessee to win, but South Carolina to cover that 11.5 point. It could legit come down to who has the ball last. This game could go either way, but give me the Vols for that home field advantage of what I think is going to be an awesome, rocking atmosphere. All right, last game of the night, and then we'll shut it down here. Number 12, Alabama going to Starkville. They got to face down the Clanger Mississippi State Bulldogs. This is a late game, 8 p.m. Alabama favored in this game by 14.5 points. We saw Will Rogers start to chuck it. Had the game of the season, near 500-yard game last week on the road at South Carolina. But Vegas does not think this is going to be high scoring. 46.5 over under. Alabama favored by 14.5. I just don't think that Mississippi State can move the ball that well against this Alabama defense. So give me Alabama to win, and I'm sorry, Bulldogs, but I am going to take Alabama to also cover that 14.5-point spread. We will see how all of these picks shake out after the next week. Are you excited as I am? Like an all SEC slate. It's one of the few that we get each season. I am pumped for it because I've got nothing to do Saturday. Just going to wake up, crack me a cold one, and put football on all day. I could not be more ready. Guys, let me know what you think in the comments. Thank you so much for listening. While you're here, smash that thumbs up, smash that like. Don't forget you can donate to the pod. That link is right here on the video and in the podcast description. Once again, please go check out my Bonfire store, bonfire.com/store/SEC recap. Link in the description, QR code right up here on YouTube. I've got merch for all of the SEC teams, and I've got something that looks great for every single one of them. Tennessee, South Carolina, game of the week. Go check out those hoodies. Go check out those sweatshirts. Really, really awesome stuff for you as the weather starts to cool off and it gets to be bonfire season and tailgating outside season. You got to look good. You got to look clean. So get you some game day gear. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here yet again on the SEC Recap podcast. Follow me on Twitter at SEC Recap. You can get all of my content at secrecap.com. Can't wait to recap the action next week. I will be right back here with you on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple, on Google Podcasts, Amazon, wherever you prefer to chug your podcast. Guys, have a great one.